So we're back for another week of this discussion series. And today we're going to be discussing modern misogyny's influence on policy surrounding social media. And you may yourself, ask the question, well, what does that have to do with parental estrangement? The purpose of this series has been to show how there are so many societal factors that play into the shift in how young adults and their parents engage in the belief systems that have been impacted by culture, media being one of them, social media being, a what do I want to say? Social media being one of those options that young people have at their fingertips today, right? And so I get a lot of pushback for this, but I really want you to stop and think about what I'm saying and consider it, right? When you look at the representation in terms of politics that shape a lot of the culture, right? It shaped a lot of the lives of people within the cities, within the states, within the country. It's predominantly male, okay? And with that being the case, those belief systems that group holds then influence how access and whether or not there are certain regulatory laws that come into play that protect the citizens, right? And so when I get people that ask me about, well, I don't understand how that plays into parental estrangement and how these two correlate, it's going to require you to do some research on your own. Last week, one of the assignments that I gave to the community was to go back and look at, I shared the MTV TV ad that we had as Gen Xers and how that was our form of interaction or interactive media with music artists that we in our generation were using and able to speak directly to them. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. Well, not just, but it's residual. And so when I shared that information, I also asked you to go back during the period of time for your children and look at the type of media that was available to them at that time. I wanted you to go and check and see what social, economic, and political things were happening during their most formative years. Because I shared with you all in the first video in this series how I noticed a shift within my own children as MySpace was one of the social media platforms that they were using at that time, right? And then it evolved into Facebook. And there's so much more coming in this series where I'm going to help you to understand how that shift has impacted, and not always in a positive way, whole nuclear families, okay? And so when you have a group of people making decisions for masses, a lot of people, then there are some challenges that come with that. Regulatory laws that are meant to be put in place to protect the health and safety and well-being of the whole are sometimes not, considered. And so when we start looking, and I'm just going to share my personal journey in this because I'm a person who loves data, because with data, you can alchemize that into, information that will help you to make the best decisions. It helps you to ask the right questions, because with the right questions, we get the correct information, right? And so in my experience, I started noticing a shift within my sons who were old enough to use social media at the time. My daughters weren't old enough yet, so they didn't have accounts on there. And as I mentioned, I was, monitoring their use of the computer at home. At that time, I think we were past dial up. I think we were finally into fiber. I think we finally made it there. Huh? DSL? It was DSL? Okay, thank you. Yeah, we were DSL. It wasn't fiber. That's my husband. And so during that time, the kids had access to the computer. They didn't have it where they were taking it outside the house except with our laptops when we would travel. But they were using the computer at home. And we had them on beforehand, I was a single mom. And so I had them on a scheduled timeline on the computer, and only when I was home. Well, little did I know that they had access to it because they were going and getting the cords and putting it back together and being able to have access to it. And this is when I shared on the last video where my son had that first viral video go for him. His first viral video be that he gave a gift of a teddy bear from his ex-girlfriend to his current girlfriend, and it went viral. Okay. And that's when you would think that we may have picked up on that this was something that could be, potentially a problem. But as I mentioned, for us as Gen X parents, I'm talking to those of us who were in that period, that was not something that we could have seen coming, right? We had MTV. We weren't worried about, we had cultural shifts happening for us, and our parents were probably just as concerned during that time, right? Because as I shared with you guys, I think within our TikTok community, I shared with you guys that my parents monitored the phone bill. And even though it was a free call, it still came up on the phone bill. And so that was, the way that they monitored and made sure that we weren't talking on the phone to people we shouldn't be talking to, right? And so that was the monitoring and the parental guidance that was available at that time. And so we, being the parents of the coming cultural shift, children that would experience the next cultural shift, thought that we were doing, the best thing by saying, okay, well, you need to not have as much computer time playing all these video games. You need to attend to your work. We didn't see it as a problem, right? There was nothing there to warn us that this could be something that could become an issue later. I remember having to talk with my sons about sharing where we were. We were on vacation. And this was after I'd gotten remarried. And we were on vacation, and they were sharing pictures of our hotel and telling people where we were, and they had our car on there. And I'm like, I don't know that that's a good idea, for people knowing that we're away from the house. I was not thinking that people that were where we were could also have access to seeing that, if that makes sense. It just wasn't a reality yet, right? That how global this thing already was. And so I began noticing the shift with my boys then. There was more pushback. That was before. I've always had a open door policy, if you will, in my home. I shared with you guys before that I had a suggestion box in our house. My children were able to call a family meeting whenever they wanted. They were able to tell me if they didn't like something. So it was never about whether or not they were able to express themselves or have their own autonomy, right? This was different. And I only know that in hindsight. At the time, I didn't. I just thought, what is happening? Is this the teenage years? I shared that I grew up with only the girls, right? So in my mind, okay, this must be the teenage years, that adolescent period where the children are pushing back and they're needing to, assert their own authorities, right? And so I just went with it. Okay, so this is just part of the process, and I just have to remind them that you have to be respectful to your parents. But I kept noticing there was more, like, for instance, the children started using the car without permission. It was just things that were happening. And later on, when I sat down and talked with my sons about this, it was very much that you had no idea what was going on, right? And there was an instance where we had to have a conversation with one of the boys about pictures that were being shared between him and another friend online, okay? And so that's when we started noticing, hey, we need to be watching this. And so we would start shutting down Wi-Fi, the internet at night. We would cut it off, go right to the router, cut it off at night. That way we were always in control of, when or what was happening. But it was those times where we thought that turning the internet back on, and during the day we're home and everybody's doing their homework and all that, it's those times that there were other things that we would later find out about, okay? And so with me doing this series, it's not about villainizing social media, because some great things have come out of social media, right? This community is possible because of social media, right? It's not the tool itself, it's the culture and the behavior that drives it, right? And so if you do your research, if you go online, you will even see for yourself of the many, there are numerous studies out there that will share with you how young people have been impacted. It has even gone as far as class action lawsuits have happened as a result. And I think there's a real pivotal one that's happening now. I in my research, I have a bunch of things that I put into folders that I'll come back to. And I'll probably have to pull that one out and we'll discuss it and later on in the series, or I'll just do a separate discussion about it. But we have to be honest about the influence of how children view their parents, right? I did a post last week in our TikTok community where I shared how we watch the evolution of music change, how children spoke of their parents and the different songs and their content, and how that just kept changing. And you can hear the cultural shift. We went from "I'll always love my mama," that song, "She's my perfect girl," or "She's the greatest girl," I can't remember. You only get one, you only get one. Some of you know that song. "I'll always love my mama." And that was in the 60s. And then you fast forward to the 90s, and we had Tupac and "Dear Mama." And he talked about loving his mother regardless to the fact that she had been had some addictions and things. So we see the cultural shift in music. That's why music is so important. Those of us in Gen X understand music. Music has been some of the most powerful motivators for cultural shifts, right? And social movements, right? And so this is an information tool. This is to get you to delve down and to start looking at things. And I'm not looking to remove the accountability factor here, but as I say and I share with you all in the community very often, accountability is our first peer. It's our first pillar. And with that accountability, I want you to be informed, because with the peer of the fourth peer, of a commitment to continuous learning, that is where your information comes in, because you need to understand that more than one thing can be true at a time. You made some mistakes. You wound up here because of what you didn't know, or what you ignored, or what you weren't prepared for, or what there were no resources for, right? And if we are looking at it from what additional environmental, societal, political, and social factors contributed to parents being ill-equipped, parents being not having the proper tools and resources to give what they needed to their children. And then in essence, those children suffered greatly under that lack thereof. That's of importance, because that takes away some of the suffering. Yes, some of us made mistakes because we didn't know, we didn't have the resources, we didn't have the money, we didn't have the home, we didn't have a car, whatever it was. Some of us suffered greatly for that through the relationships with our children. And so that this is educational, so that you can go, you can do the research, you can learn about what additional factors were impacting you and your family during the times when there was a shift in your relationship. Because I guarantee you, if you go and you walk backwards through this, you'll start seeing some other factors that you'd never considered, right? And that makes room for softening your heart and having self-compassion for yourself, compassion for your adult child who may be, still suffering from the lack of accountability that they feel that you have not given to them. And you may not have given it because you didn't understand the factors that they were given to you and how that impacted them. And even though you knew, or that you were doing the best you could with what you had, it didn't change the impact that it had on them, okay? So this is an information tool that helps you to gather more information, to be able to have more self-compassion, to have more compassion for your adult child, and the factors that maybe you didn't even know would become a factor. How did we know that social media would have such a great impact on our families, on our society, on the world, right? And so I'm hoping that something I shared with you is useful. It sets you on the right path to discovery, to healing, and hopefully, ultimately, healing your family. But as always, the goal here is never about reconciliation. That's a great byproduct of your self-healing, but it's not a promise. None of us have authority or control over whether or not our children decide to reconcile. That is a decision that they get to make. But we get to make the decision about how we heal and how we enjoy the time we do have left here. So I'll see you next week. Monday I will post, Friday, it's Friday. Tomorrow I will post the topic for next week. And please feel free to leave your comments below or in the community, because that's what helps others feel seen and know they're not alone. Yes, I would love to be able to engage with you, but I understand that for some of you that's not going to be possible. And my main goal is not engagement, it's to empower. It's to get you what you need on this journey, because it's a difficult one. Okay, I'll see you guys next week.